And so I just think, we as leaders need to create a culture that is attractive for people that want to come in and work with people that are willing to get their hands dirty, willing to leap from their proverbial stands, whatever it is that they're willing to kind of, humble themselves and say, I'm in this with you guys. I'm in the trenches. And look, we're in the midst of fourth quarter right now. The best leaders I've ever seen are people that say, hey, look, let me help you with that. Let me stay late with you. I got teams that are sitting there making copies or putting materials together, and the best leaders jump in and say, what can I do for you tonight?
Welcome to Benefits Broker Boost, the show that gives employee benefits brokers practical strategies to grow, scale, and streamline their business. Presented by Plansight, where innovation meets efficiency in employee benefits. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of Benefits Broker Boost. I'm joined today by Scott Millson. Scott, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation today. Scott, for anyone that doesn't know, has been in the employee benefits space for decades, from owning his own agency to working for major companies in the industry like Hub, Hewitt Associates. There's a really long history of employee benefits and leadership, which is going to be our main topic of focus today. I got connected with Scott I saw him with his book in an image, and the book was called Frequency of Excellence. And so I bought the book on Audible. I love audiobooks. So I listen to them when I'm exercising, and started listening to Scott's book, and it's phenomenal. If you have a chance and you're interested in anything leadership wise, it's a really, really great listen for me, or read if you want to buy it on an actual copy of the book. But Scott, anything else about your book or career that I missed there?
No, I'm sure we'll dive into lots of pieces of it. So happy to jump in with you.
Yeah, I pulled quite a bit of the content that we're going to talk about today out of things that I learned from the book or heard from the book. So there will be a lot of that. Well, we'll just jump right in. So again, I'm just going to reemphasize this. Plansight, we make that RFP process streamlined for employee benefits brokers, try to make the work that they're doing and that their teams are doing significantly easier. The goal of this podcast is to give ways that employee benefits brokers or agencies can streamline their business. That's where we focus, can grow their business. And that's kind of what our topic of content is going to be today, is leadership, employee retention, team morale. And that's kind of Scott's area of expertise in his career. So we'll dive right in. So, your book is called Frequency of Excellence, and you described tuning into the frequency of excellence as a way of seeing lessons that are around you. For agency leaders that are listening, what does it look like practically to build a culture that's tuned into the frequency of excellence every day?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll take a big step back here, and I'm going to date myself with this. But so when I grew up, the car stereos that we had were these AM, FM radios, and there was a right-hand knob that was a tuner. And so this whole idea of frequency of excellence is a lot like tuning the frequency on that AM, FM radio dial. So in order to kind of get the music to come through, and my favorite radio station growing up was 103.7 on the radio dial, and there was 100 and there was a 104, but there was no 103.7. So you had to really maneuver that right-hand knob in order to get just on the right frequency to allow the music to come through. And so, my belief is, and this is kind of how I've lived my career, how I've lived my life and my career, is that I've had to be dialed into the right frequency in order to pick up on those signals. And so for me, I was fortunate to work with just some incredible organizations throughout my career. And so I had to be dialed in, I had to be dialed into that right frequency to pick up on all the lessons that were around me. And so at the core of frequency of excellence is a growth mindset. And that came about, there was a professor from Stanford University called Dr. Carol Dweck in the late 80s, and she popularized this term called a growth mindset. And the idea is that it's a belief that you can learn and your intellect, et cetera, is not fixed, that you can grow and learn from that. And so I knew early in my career I was never going to be the smartest person in a room, but I could outlearn and outwork everybody. And so that's what I essentially did, is I would enter into conversations with watching a great salesperson or watching a leader do something. And I had to be kind of tuned in and kind of paying attention to what they were saying. And so that growth mindset was kind of my superpower, was my ability to kind of watch what they were doing, pick up on the various things that they were doing well, and add that to my being. And so I think, agency owners and agency principals have that same ability today, practically, to kind of be a model of that. And so, to show people that are reporting to you, or the people within your firm, that you personally have a growth mindset. Whether you're listening to podcasts such as this, whether you're reading books, whether you're attending conferences and you're coming back and saying, here's what I learned from this, or here's what I picked up from this particular book. Those opportunities, I think, are there for us as leaders to share that. And I think when you do that, people within your team start saying, well, that's how the boss is behaving. That's how the agency leader is behaving. I should do the same. And so you kind of model that behavior, I think, for the employees that are looking up to you.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like you become a sponge for all things that could make you better, right? That's, we live in the information age. You can find things anywhere about what you're trying to learn about. Podcasts, websites, I mean, you name it, ChatGPT, and any of the AI models can give you information very, very quickly, but sponging that in, learning from it, and setting that frequency of excellence is something that I think as a team, I've seen teams that do really well at that, and I've also seen teams that struggle with it. So that's thanks for describing that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so at Hewitt Associates, you said you were surrounded by excellence for over 17 years while you were there. Let's talk some of the specific cultural practices or leadership behaviors from that era that you say agencies could learn from today to build stronger internal teams.
Yeah. So, it is true that I believe that, Hewitt Associates, and it doesn't exist really today. They were purchased by Aon and then it got spun back out. And so what once was Hewitt Associates, if anybody is, again, of my vintage, you probably remember the name. People newer to the industry probably don't recognize it as much, but it was a daily master's class of kind of watching what people did and seeing how they performed and perfected and consulted with customers. But at the root of a lot of it was humility. I think when I joined Hewitt Associates, the thing that attracted me the most is the humility of the consultants, people that were way smarter than I was, like, just unbelievable consultants, unbelievable leaders, brilliant people. Just their humility, I think, shone through that. And I think it was their willingness to pour into everybody. And so, I have a chapter in my book. You may remember this. It's called JGID, which is just get it done. It's also pronounced JGID. It wasn't necessarily a Hewitt term, but it came about through actually my son, who was fortunate to be able to run track and cross country at the University of Florida. And the athletic director at the time that he was there, actually at the very tail end, was a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Foley, and I got to know him personally a little bit. But there was a story that I think resonated with me, and I think underscores kind of the Hewitt mentality and I think successful organizations. And that is, there's an old Pope Francis quote that says, a shepherd should smell like his sheep. And I think, what that means is that you never see yourself above others, yet you never see yourself kind of not willing to do the hard work, et cetera. And I think as a leader, I think it's important for us to be able to have that mentality, that JGID mentality, or shepherd smelling like his sheep. And so the story is, it was related to me, and the athletic director was, he's athletic director, right? So he's top of the food chain. And he attended with a friend of mine, he attended a tennis event. And as typically happens, and I went to the University of Florida, what happens in the afternoon of Florida is it rains every day at 4:00. You can set your watch to it. And it rained. And so they, had to stop the match. They come in there, the team comes out and they start squeegeeing the court. Well, they were a little shorthanded. So the athletic director jumped from the stands, grabbed one of the squeegees and started helping him squeegee the courts. And my friend looked at him and he said, dude, you're the athletic director. Like, why? There have to be people that do this. Why are you doing that? And his answer was you just get it done. Like, nobody is above this organization. Nobody's above the place. And I think that humility of that type of leader, I think, drew people to want to be part of that athletic department, to want to be part of that mentality, I think, that I saw at Hewitt Associates, that, you had people all throughout leadership roles at Hewitt that really focused in on saying, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I'm going to leap from the proverbial stands, and I'm going to squeegee the court. And if I need to type out a letter, or I got to go to a meeting that's below me, I'm going to go do it. And so I just think as leaders, we have to be willing to humble ourselves and get our hands dirty and get the work done. To smell like our sheep. And I think that's really important for us as leaders to make sure that we're able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's more in that thought of just get it done, then people realize it's kind of two-sided, right? I have people that are close to me that I know for a fact, no question in my mind, are far more intelligent than I am. And they can kind of think themselves into this analysis paralysis and not get it done. And it causes them to almost stumble because of that, almost because of the intelligence, but because of the lack of just getting it done, their progress is far slower. Right. So career wise, financial situation all develops more slowly because they're not getting it done. And I think, as humans, we're always looking for that, what's the next thing we need to do? But for the most part, we know already, right? We just have to go do it. And it's maybe the thing we don't want to do. But yeah, that's a really, really good leadership mantra. And I like that. I like that description of the guy jumping out of the stands to squeegee the court, because I've been in athletics and around athletic directors, and that's not a normal mentality for them. So
Yeah. But
that's huge.
again, I think, as leaders, I think culture is the shadow of a leader. And I think what we do as leaders casts a big shadow. And so we're setting that culture and people are watching us. And so you may not say, it's on a goal list that I want to jump from the stands and go squeegee a court, but when you do it, people see that and they see that shadow that leader, casts. I think people want to be part of that. And so I just think, we as leaders need to create a culture that is attractive for people that want to come in and work with people that are willing to get their hands dirty, willing to leap from their proverbial stands, whatever it is that they're willing to kind of, humble themselves and say, I'm in this with you guys. I'm in the trenches. And look, we're in the midst of fourth quarter right now. The best leaders I've ever seen are people that say, hey, look, let me help you with that. Let me stay late with you. I got teams that are sitting there making copies or putting materials together. And the best leaders jump in and say, what can I do for you tonight? And there's an old mantra that I heard that, great leaders, they check in, they don't check up. And check in with your team during this fourth quarter, check in with them, see how they're doing. Don't check up on them. Don't say, hey, did you get that done? You got to ask that, but just ask how you doing. How's it going? What can I help you with? Those things go a long way. And I think people want to be around those types of organizations.
Definitely. That's some great advice. All right. So you've led teams pretty much at every level, right? From founding your own firm to leading Hub Florida. When you think about team retention in today's benefits agencies, what's changed the most, and what keeps top talent loyal to an agency and keeps them engaged?
Yeah. There's an old adage that people don't leave companies. They necessarily they leave their manager. They leave their leader. And so I think, we have to recognize that. Now, I also say that, a lot has changed. And so people have changed. This is not our father's workforce any longer. This isn't my workforce. I started my career in 1989. This is not the same workforce that I grew up in. It's a different workforce, and we have to adapt and adjust to that. There's an old thing called Kurzweil's Law, which is Ray Kurzweil wrote a book, I think, in the 90s or something like that. And he talked about it's kind of the acceleration of technology and how in the 21st century, we're going to experience like 20,000 years of advancement. So technology is advancing and we recognize that and we're leveraging that, et cetera. We got to recognize that people are changing with that and we have to modify and adapt how we do things today. It can't be the same way we did it 20 years ago. We're all in this whole return to work and, what's going on with the workforce. Are we going to be remote? We're going to be hybrid, or we're going to be on site? Like, what is it? And I'm not going to get into that debate like that. There's a whole podcast you could have just on that topic. But I do think we have to be aware that the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? COVID caused us to go in different directions that allowed people to see flexibility is really important. And so I'm a firm believer. I'm not a giant fan of fully remote. I know that it can work and I have seen it work, but I do think we have to be aware that the best development and the best connection points and the relationships that get built are better face to face. And so some form of a hybrid is kind of my preference. Because I do think you need to provide the flexibility that people experienced and you got to give that. But at the same time, I think you have to be aware that toothpaste is out of the tube a bit. So, I do think kind of a mid ground is probably the way to go with that. And I know you didn't ask me specifically about that, but I just think that is on the top of everybody's mind is RTO, and what does that look like, and am I going to force people to come back or not? I think you have to acknowledge that it has adapted and has adjusted. I just think that people are generally they want to be connected, they want to be developed, they want to build relationships. Regardless of what happens with technology, people are people, and we are human beings. We're relational people. And so I do think we have to lean into that to make sure that we as leaders are creating an environment where people do feel connected. They do feel a relationship. They do feel a genuine desire to help them develop as professionals. And so, I just think we have to be aware of that and make sure that we're providing that opportunity for the employees in our charge.
Yeah. That's a hard balance, I think, right now. Is the face to face is really important. And those relationships being built in person are more
Yeah.
important, I would say, than ever. We I mean, you look at a lot of the research that social media is doing for us, and it's creating these dopamine spikes that, make us keep going back to it. And it's this artificial connection where we're not actually connected to the person, but we're getting some of the feelings of actual connection. And so getting that, but also I'm on the flip side of that right now where I am working fully remote, and I just came from an office where I was fully in office,
Yeah.
and I saved 8 hours a week of commuting. And if someone tried to take that back from me right now, I would fight really hard not to give the 8 hours back because it's so convenient. So it is this like fine balance to strike, and I think that is something that people are weighing into their decision of whether or not they stay at a place or go to a new place. So it's good that you brought that up. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I just think, a full return to office of 5 days in the week, I just think that's probably past. I don't think that's there. I think we need to provide the flexibility, but we also need to recognize that I do think that things, in-person meetings and in-person relationships are built stronger those days. So you got to find some mix, and maybe it's just quarterly meetings, something. There has to be some type of connection there. Otherwise, it's really hard, I think, to build loyalty and to get the loyalty in return.
yeah, it's going to continue to adapt, I think, as people try to balance what works
Yeah.
best. But
Yep.
it's gonna be fun to watch. Um, so you've said this, and this is something that I find myself very similar. You've said your true strength wasn't being the top technical expert, but was being a problem solver and a relationship builder.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think most agencies get wrong about client retention? And how can they shift from more of a transactional approach to a transformational relationship? Like you kind of pride yourself in being that builder up.
Yeah. I mean, I think goes back to the human nature side of it. I think clients are people, and what they want is they want to build relationships. Clients, they yearn for somebody that can solve their problems. So I'm never going to say that you can't, product knowledge, et cetera, is really important. So you got to know how to do those things, because those are kind of table stakes. But ultimately what clients want is they want to build relationships with people. And so I think we need to lean into that, make sure that we are doing a lot more listening than we are probably talking. I usually talk about this as mostly around sales, but I think it also works kind of in the client retention side of it, which is, that, um, I always say problem knowledge is greater than product knowledge. And so I think we need to understand what our clients' problems are. And the only way that we're going to better understand our clients' problems is ask a ton of questions, is just be incredibly curious, almost like a 4-year-old child, and just, why did you do, why? Tell me more about that. And when the client starts talking to you about what their problems are, ask 20 more questions, really unpack that and help them understand, or help you understand what their problems are. And I think when you do that, one of our basic human desires is to be seen, heard, and understood. And I think, clients just want to know that you have a genuine desire to, help them be seen, help them be heard, and help them be understood. And so solving their problem is a big part of that, but understanding truly what the problem is and make sure you're solving the right problem is paramount to everything. And so, I'm a firm believer in, relationships are the driver of our industry. And you could have a great widget, you could have a great way that you go about doing something, but if you don't build relationships with your customers, it'll be fleeting, and a change in leadership or a change in Product, something goes wrong with a product or something doesn't go as well, then, if it's based on a thin layer of product relationship, then it's not going to be there. But if it's a human relationship, I think those are there for the long haul. And I think client retention then increases dramatically with that.
Yeah. If you're going to take one thing out of this, that's it. But it's more complex than just the surface level, right? I think that in general, we all think that we're better at this than we actually are. But a relationship, sometimes when we look at a relationship, we're like, yeah, we send them a Christmas gift, right? That's not a relationship. Um, Someone that truly has a relationship with you knows that you're working for their best interests as well.
Yeah.
Right. I made a post on LinkedIn the other day about a friend of mine who I always know when I go to lunch with her, she's going to tell me the things I need to hear, whether or not I want to hear them. It's not, hey, I sent you a Christmas gift. It's she's got my best interests in mind, and I know that. And she can say the hard things to me, and we still have a really, really great relationship. Because I know she's always working for my best interest in those relationships. Right. And until you know what that best interest is, and you've asked the questions and you've listened and you've understood what that person is trying to do, you can't really approach it from, they can't trust that you know what their best interests are, let alone that you're working towards their best interests. So really, really great highlight there of we need to be asking all of the questions and listening. And when you do that, you don't have to have the best price. And it's not like someone's going to come in willy-nilly and give them like a slightly lower rate. And they will know if you're communicating with them properly that you've already considered that, which hopefully you have, and why you've said for their situation may not be the best option for them, right? They'll know that. And so you don't always have to, sometimes we always think we have to win on price. You don't always have to win on price. You have to win on helping them solve the problem that they're trying to solve.
That's right.
Obviously, if you can do it for the best price, great. But yeah, really, really great advice there.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. I would say, if you win on price, you will lose on price. And it's really easy for somebody to undercut your price, right? I mean, if you're going to bake your value on price, you will absolutely lose it with the next person that comes in at the lower price. If you win on relationships are really hard to unwind. And so it is really hard to lose on relationship, really easy to lose on price, very difficult to lose on relationship if you're truly keeping at that relationship. You'd mentioned something a second ago. I read this book. It was nearly 20 years ago, but it has stuck with me. There was an equation that was used to define trust. And so trust is equal to, so stick with me on this equation. It was credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. And so you can measure trust off of that. How credible are you? How reliable are you? So if you say you're going to do something, you got to deliver on it. That's reliability. Credibility is, what the heck you're talking about. Like, I need to be a product expert. So back when I said product knowledge is less than problem knowledge, you still got to be an expert in product. Like that's table stakes. And then, so back to the equation. So credibility, reliability, intimacy is like, how well do you truly know the person? And then the self-orientation is the trump card. If your self-orientation is high, you're driving trust low. So your self-orientation, you can't get in to build a trusting relationship with somebody if it's all about you. It has to be about the customer. It has to be about the client. And if you can make it clear to them that it ain't about you and you're not in this for you, you're trying to be generous in helping out the customer solve their problems, man, that trust goes way up. And again, you won't lose on that if you build your relationship on that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting equation to think about. And I'd say very, very accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to shift a little bit into a framework that I've heard you talk about in a few different places, the B5 framework.
Yep.
That is being present, curious, intentional, bold, and reflective. And you kind of, that's again within the relationship, within your career. Which of those 5 traits do you feel like you've trained a lot of new brokers, a lot of new leaders? Which of those 5 traits do you feel like is most often missing today in leaders, and how can they develop that?
Yeah. So the B5 framework kind of came about after I wrote the book, because I kept getting asked by people, so like, okay, I get this tuner mentality, but what is my tuner? What is my ability to tune into the frequency of excellence around me? And so the B5 framework kind of came out of that. And so it was, as you said, intentional, being intentional, which is about surrounding yourself with excellence. If you surround yourself with excellence, you will experience excellence more frequently. So just, iron sharpens iron. If you want to soar with the eagles, don't run with the turkeys. That whole philosophy. Being present, being curious is kind of self-explanatory, but truly being present with people, tuning out the distractions, focusing on the people that you're working with. Curiosity is that 4-year-old mentality of just, I don't understand why you did that. Explain that to me. Help me understand that, and ask 20 questions on that. And then being bold is like leaning into your failures, so understanding what your failures are, and then being reflective is taking the time to pause and allow those things to what you see and those excellence that you see, allow that to kind of wash over you and store that. So back to your question. So a little bit of background on that, but back to your question, I would say the two that I think are the most difficult today is being present, mostly because of that device that's sitting a few inches from your fingers right now, and it's buzzing and beeping as we're sitting here and drawing our attentions away from it. So it is really hard to be present today. And when you're not present, you miss the opportunities to experience excellence. And so I think, as agency owners, as people within agencies, it's really hard to be present, but it is so critically important. And so I just think, life happens in those moments when we're paying attention, when we're really paying attention to what's going on, and we're present with people. And then curiosity, I think, is a way underutilized superpower today. I think we can all be more curious than we have been historically. And I think when we're curious, I just think you learn from people. I believe that I've surrounded myself with people that have something that I aspire to be. And the only way I'm going to get it from them is be present with them and ask them a ton of questions. Like when I watched a salesperson overcome an objection, I didn't just go, well, that was good, we're going to get the sale. Like I looked at it and I followed up with them. And I said, what made you anticipate that was going to be their objection? You started laying it out 5 minutes before they even said the objection. What tipped you to that? Like what was in your mind to get you to do that? That's excellence. And when so I would ask questions. I'd say, so tell me how you did that. Like what made you think about that? And so I think the curiosity, I think, is underutilized today. And I think we as leaders in our organization can really drive curiosity more throughout our organization and allow that to be part of who we are as an agency, is be curious. Your customers will appreciate the curiosity as well.
Yeah. I actually was thinking about, I love both of those because I think they are major issues. We have distractions readily available, and we do get that dopamine hit from them sometimes, right? You get the notification, and these people that design our technology, they are paid millions and millions of dollars to make us use it more frequently. I was thinking about it because I had to make a very conscious shift in my presence, being present with my children so I just transitioned careers, and my previous career had a few pieces of it that were pretty much always on and always demanding of my time. And I could always find a reason to be doing those things and then justifying those reasons of, well, I'm providing for my family, I'm making sure that their needs are taken care of. And so it's kind of this like vicious cycle of, I'm with them, I should be paying attention to them, I'm still spending time with them technically, but I'm not present in what's happening. And when I tenured my resignation there, it was not even 2 weeks later where I didn't have that always on piece, where within probably 3-day time frame, one of my kids said, he's the one that's very truthful. He said, I actually like being around my dad now. That was kind of the mean way of saying it. And then one of my daughters said, my dad's so much more fun now that he quit his job. And it wasn't that I was spending more time with them. I was with them for the same amount of time, but my presence with them and being in the conversation was different. And I started thinking about that. And it's almost like it's hard to explain, because when we're with them, we're doing things that are, we're thinking about things that are elsewhere. And then when we're with those people, we're trying to think about the things that are here. And it's like, if you actually just present with the people you're supposed to be present with, you have a more meaningful engagement with them, and you still, on a whole, spend the same amount of time with the same people, but it's just more fulfilling time. So that was the first thought. And then the second one was, let's see, around being curious. Um, I think a lot of times, especially younger people in their career, they'll avoid the curiosity because they don't want to look dumb, right? If it's something they should know, they just don't ask the question.
Yeah.
And they might then later try to go ask ChatGPT, "Hey, well, what about this? Well, I heard this today," and that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But when you've got someone in front of you that can explain that and even elaborate on it, that's a better situation. But also, and you know this as a leader, and I know this as a leader, but when someone displays that curiosity and that they're trying to problem solve and they're trying to learn, it's the trait that you're looking for in a future leader, right? So when I see someone asking me all sorts of questions and trying to get better at marketing and trying to get better at their career, that's something that I admire in someone. And you can tell me if it's not the same for you, but I'd suspect probably the same.
100%. Yeah. I think three of the most powerful words that we can use as leaders and even as salespeople is I don't know. I think those are way underutilized words that are incredibly powerful. When I say to a customer, I don't know, it does a couple of different things. One is I think the initial concern is, well, now you're not going to come across as an expert, right? I mean, so you have to know all the answers. But again, problem knowledge is greater than product knowledge. If I say, I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you on that, I have now created a level of authenticity and go back to that, kind of that equation. The trust just went up. By me saying, I don't know, I gained more trust from that customer than if I tried to BS my way through an answer, right? Because they're going to at some point figure out that I'm BSing or I'm giving such a light answer that this doesn't really answer anything. But by me saying, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to get it for you, I've now built a level of trust that doesn't exist. And I think as leaders, again, I think we try to think, well, we are leaders. I need to know the answer to everything, right? That's why I'm in a leadership position. You create a degree of authenticity and a relationship there, and trust goes up the moment you say to your employees, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't experienced that yet. Or I'm not quite certain. Let me get back to you on that. I think that's fine. I think we as leaders need to use those three words more frequently. And look, I'm not saying go into every situation and say, I don't know squat, right? I mean, you got to be careful with it, but at the same time, don't be afraid to say that you don't know something, because I think the trust will shoot up the moment that you do that.
And that ties in with the reliability that you talked about earlier. If you say you don't know, but I'm going to let you know, I'm going to get back to you.
Yeah.
Make sure you get back to them, and then
Yeah.
like you said, when you do that, the trust goes up. Awesome. Okay, so in your book, you explore the topic of mentorship, and we already had a conversation about this. This was really impactful for me because I feel like I've taken the same approach to mentorship that you took throughout your career. And it's an informal mentorship, right? It's someone that's doing what you're doing and trying to get in the same room as them, trying to ask those questions, be curious to that person, and ultimately that can become a friendship and then real mentorship. But what advice would you give a young producer or account manager who's trying to find mentors naturally within their agency or within their network to start building that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I believe that there is a mentorship gap, and it's not just in our industry, it's across the United States. I think that we have a mentorship gap. And I think, there was a recent study it said that it polled a certain number of people and it said, is it important for you to have a mentor? And I think it was something like 80% of people said that it was good to have a mentor. Now, I don't know who the heck the 20% is there. Like, I think it would be 100%, but 80% said that they should have a mentor. 37% actually had a mentor. So there's this gap that exists of knowing that I should have it, but I don't really have that in my life. And I think a lot of the reason why it is, and I explore this in my book, is I say that I believe too often people are looking at it to be a formalized relationship, right? You're looking for your CEO or the head of HR or COO or whoever to come in and say, Adam, I want you to be mentored by this person. You guys go meet and have lunch a couple of weeks, a couple of times a month. It's not genuine. Like, it's not, it's like an arranged marriage that usually doesn't work. Maybe arranged marriages work in some cultures, but generally it's just, there's not a bond that exists. But when you can naturally say, I found somebody in my universe who is doing something exceptionally well, or is doing something that I aspire to be at that level or to have that skill set. And I just sit there and watch them and just watch what they do. I asked to be signed up for the projects that they're on. I asked to go on maybe a couple of clients that they're on, or go on a call with them. I will I will just watch what they're doing. And then over time, a relationship will develop and they'll become a mentor. I've probably had 50 mentors in my life. And not in any one of those situations did I go up to somebody and say, I'd like you to mentor me. There was no formal knighting ceremony. There was no certificates that hung on our wall that says John mentored Scott and, confetti with it. It was just a relationship that I built with this individual because they were doing something that I thought was exceptional, that I thought was excellence, and I wanted to be around that. And so I just simply watched what they did and they mentored me. I mean, that gentleman that I mentioned, I just kind of said it jokingly, is John. One of my favorite mentors in my career is a guy by the name of John Bausch. He and I worked together 25 years ago. 25. I still to this day will pick up the phone and call him. Hey, John, I'm thinking about doing something. What do you think? And again, that just grew out naturally of us working together. And I stopped. That guy was really gifted at things. And so I leaned into that and he became my mentor. And so again, I just think sometimes we're looking for it to be too formal. I just think mentorship is just about finding something that you in somebody that and or somebody that you aspire to be like, and just spend a lot of time with them. Be intentional about surrounding yourself with them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to further elaborate on the, waiting for a formal introduction to a formal mentorship. The person that's doing the mentoring in that situation, if Scott, if you were to reach out and say, "Hey, I've got a friend that wants to get into marketing, will you mentor him or her?" That's a big commitment from me. And it's almost like, you're asking me to do this, this big service for someone on a commitment where I might be like, I don't really have the time right now. Right. But if you mention to that person, hey, Adam knows what he's talking about in marketing, try to like get his ear, be helpful to him
Yep.
and build that mentorship. And they reached out and said, hey, I love what you're doing. Sorry you're doing this. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. That's a situation that I would say yes to far faster than, hey, will you be this person's mentor? If I have time, sure. I love mentoring people and helping people. But if I'm busy and you're asking for a formal mentorship and it's like, hey, we're going to meet once a month, that's like maybe not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But so think through that as well. If you're looking for mentors, be in their space, know what they're doing and talk about how that's impacted you, and then be that curious person. How did you come up with that? How did you figure that out? And then that person sees that you're already trying to replicate some of the things that they're doing, and that mentorship can grow naturally.
Beautifully
And
said. Yep. I agree with you 100%. Yep.
all right. So you talk in your book about moving, it's Arthur Brooks' idea of moving from resume virtues to eulogy virtues. How have you've had a pretty big shift in your career over the last few years as you're winding down to retirement. How has that shifted for you? And what are some of the changes in focus that you've had over that time?
Yeah, it was a powerful moment for me. So the book that you reference is From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks. I read it 4 or 5 years ago, and it struck me. And he talks about these two curves of our life. And in the first curve, we are striving to be the best, right? You're trying to be the best marketing person. You're trying to be the best leader, the best insurance person, the best producer, whatever it is. And it's all metric driven. I need to be better than I was the day before. And you're pushing to try to striving to be the best. And it's exhausting, right? I mean, we're all in the midst of that. I was in that point in my life. But there comes a point where your drive, energy, enthusiasm, intellect, whatever, it's going to drop. Like that first curve will end at some point. And if you don't find a second curve to jump to, you're going into the dirt. Like it's going to drive you right into the ground because you can't strive to be the best anymore because you've lost energy or, again, intellect or whatever it is. So you got to find a second curve. And so for me, second curve was writing my book. And so I wanted to encourage others. I wanted to lean in on mentorship with other people. I wanted to kind of be a voice for people to be able to continue to have that growth mindset. And so I found that second curve. And so, I have in this second curve now, I am just, I'm pouring, you used a sponge analogy earlier. Like I sponged in that first curve. I collected information. I collected things and lessons from people. And now I'm just taking that sponge and I'm just squeezing it out. I don't need all this stuff in here. I'm just squeezing it out. So I'm sharing it with others. And so that's really what I'm doing on this second curve. And as Arthur Brooks calls it, it's a little morbid, but he calls it our eulogy virtues. We're not working on resume anymore. My resume is what it is, But now I'm working on my eulogy. I'm trying to give back and try to help other people.
It's got to be a rewarding shift.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a different outlook on all of the things you're doing, different purpose, I would say.
Yeah,
Then
absolutely. 100%.
hopefully there's a good overlap in purpose, that one purpose wasn't like void of
Yes.
meaning for the other. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's got to be a really interesting shift.
Yeah. I'm enjoying
Well,
it.
I'm gonna ask one more question. This has been really, really amazing for anyone that's coming up in the industry, any new leaders in the industry, anyone that's trying to retain teams, keep talent together. Some really, really good advice here, and also in your book. Um, in your opinion, what should young professionals in the employee benefits space be most excited about, going into 2026? I keep saying in 2025, which we still are, but we got like one and a half months left. So going into 2026, what should they be most excited about?
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that is jealous that I'm kind of in that second curve and I'm looking back at the first curve and I'm seeing people, anybody that's a young professional in the insurance industry, there are two things I would anchor on. Insurance ain't going anywhere, right? I mean, there's going to be legislation changes. It's going to be tweaked here and there, but the need for medical insurance will always be there. Like that, it's not going anywhere. So have faith in that. The second thing is, there's a lot of old people like me that are kind of aging out of this industry. And there's creating this gap that exists between the people that are kind of coming into the industry and the people that are aging out. And we didn't do a good job in this industry of bringing people along, so I'm nearly 60 and, there's a fair number of people that are 60 and above that are still in this industry. And guess what? They're going to be leaving in the next 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 years. That's going to create a gap. And I think that opportunity is there for people that are in their, 20s and 30s to be able to fill that gap in and learn from those people, take relationships from those people as they leave. You can inherit relationships. So I just think there's a big opportunity for young professionals in this industry right now to take advantage of that. Take advantage of the fact that insurance ain't going anywhere, but take advantage of the fact that there are some people in this industry that are going places and they're going to be retiring and leaving a gap there. So I'd be excited if I was in that stage of my career, because I just think there's a great opportunity for a lot of people here.
That's a super interesting perspective, and one we haven't gotten yet. So that's that I think that's probably really encouraging for anyone that's cutting their teeth or just getting some traction. So thanks for sharing that. All right, Scott, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that? LinkedIn, email? How should they contact you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably easiest. So it's Scott Millson, Millson. My website is scottmillson.com. You can see there, you can order the book. You can see kind of the keynotes I'm doing. But yeah, I'm happy to hear from anybody. And, again, I'm bullish on the industry. And if somebody wants to reach out and say, hey, whether it's going to be a formal mentorship or just, hey, can we grab some coffee, or the next time you're in my town, could we go grab lunch? I'm in. So just, let me know, and I'm happy to help any way I can.
Awesome. And we'll add that in the show notes. So thanks again for your time. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, for watching this episode of Benefits Broker Boost, and be better tomorrow than you were today. Take care.
Thanks.